a little back in time, not how you met, but do you remember your first impression of the boys? I don't want to call them boys; they're not my boys, but of the Coens. Do you remember your first impressions upon meeting them?
Well, I call them the boys. I think most people who anyone who knew them that long ago still does.
Right.
Well, they were. I guess we were all. My goodness, how old were we? We were in our later 20s and mid to late 20s. They seemed a lot like me and my friends. You know, it was that time in life where you're out of college, but you're still wandering about with what you're going to do, and so they just looked like any other pair of film students, honestly. And their movie, they showed me reel or two of the film. It was so rough. I think it would have been hard to see brilliance there. I didn't really.
Well, so they saw you a rough, some rough reels of Blood Simple at the time.
Yes.
What was that? What was the implication in showing it to you? Were you already contracted to collaborate, or were they saying, "Hey, we're filmmakers and this is what we're up to"? At what stage did they first kind of bring you into the process?
Yeah, I was far from being contracted.
Yes.
It was my first film as well, and their sound editor, Skip Leavesay, who is still their sound editor. I think the two of us are maybe the only ones who are left from those very early days, still with Joel and Ethan. But Skip had called me because he was a bass player in a band, and I played in bands in the city, and he thought, I guess, that the music I was playing it's like CBGBs, but I was doing instrumental music as opposed to playing something like the Ramones, and he thought that it might be right for this movie. I really don't know why he thought that, but he did, and he asked if I was interested in that possibility. And I said, sure, I'll take a look at it. So that was it. I was there to see if it was something I'd like to do, and also for them to see me and see if they thought we'd get along. After the fact, many years later, Joel told me that the composer interviews that they did were by far the strangest auditions they've ever done. He thought that there was just the oddest group of people who end up doing what I do.
Right. It's funny. Joel may have looked like he was in the Ramones at that point in time. He was a bit of a rocker in a way. It's funny that you described them in within a context using words like film school or film students, because, and I mean this in the most complimentary way, to me they're perpetual film students, but they're kind of straight A students. They're kind of these uber students in the sense of their detail and their perfectionism and the world, the kind of hyper insulated world. The other part to the question is, have they changed a lot from that first energy they communicated to you as filmmakers? Are they still at heart those guys you met in the early 80s?
They really are. I mean, of course, I didn't really know them that well at that point. I know them better now, but no, they haven't really changed at all. Back then, they were cutting in their apartment, and now they have a cutting room in the basement of their office. There's an office building in Tribeca, and I don't know. They're still. And they're still the same kind of person. They come to work every day, whether they're working on a film or not. They have a very, I wouldn't call it a work ethic. I don't think it has anything to do with ethics. I think they like working, and if they don't have a film they're working on, they come to work and they write a new one. And they were like that back then. They were, I think I'm a similar way. I really enjoy my work, and it means a lot to me. So I'm at the piano every day, whether I'm working on something or not. And we're that. I don't know that everyone is that way. I've met filmmakers who aren't, but they're that way.
Do you think that's part of the kismet, or the part of the chemistry advantage between the three of you, that there is a similar work ethic? We just saw a movie where ethics, this word ethics, but
ethics, yeah.
Your ethics, running things, is it? Do you think that there's part of the DNA, the work DNA, is similar between the three of you?
I mean, that is true, and And I guess it could be different if that weren't true. But the fact is, once you're into production on a movie, and until you hit the finish line, everybody's working all the time. You know, when you're on the film, everyone is like that, and so I don't know that makes that much of a difference. The thing that's maybe a little different about them is the way that they like to work, even if they don't have a job per se.
Yeah, yeah.
But but you're right. I mean, the fact that we really, you know, we get fulfillment from this process, whether or not it's resulting in a film, is something we have in common. That's probably important.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about before we get to Miller's and go back in 25 years with you with Miller's Crossing. Talk a little bit about not so much when you come in as a composer, but when do you come into a process, or when do you hear about a Coen Brothers project, in the sense of, let's take Miller's Crossing. Did they say to you, hey, you know, we have a script and we want to do a film, maybe a film noir gangster thing, or do they come to you and they say, hey, we're shooting? When do you almost literally learn about the project at hand?
It really varies. I always learn about it before they shoot, because they will, let's say I haven't heard about it in any, otherwise, they will call me before they go to shoot, and we usually have one conversation. It's interesting, but it's become a tradition. Before they go to shoot, we have one conversation to try to initiate the process of thinking about this movie. And but sometimes I'll hear about them years in advance. I remember at one point they handed me 3 screenplays, and it was Burn After Reading and Serious Man and something else. They handed me basically the next 3 years of work. They had them all. They happen to know. It's very unusual for them or any filmmaker to know what they're doing for the next 3 years, but they did, and they handed me a huge pile. But
yeah.
But I guess, you know, it's sometime before they start to shoot. We'll get together, we'll talk about, in very general terms, the music might be like, what it's about, and it helps them budgeting, you know, as well. To say, for instance, for Miller's Crossing, our previous films were Blood Simple and Raising Arizona. Blood Simple is basically just a piano and some electronics. Raising Arizona, banjo, a yodeler, kazoo, things like that.
Right.
But they knew that they wanted an orchestral score for Miller's Crossing, and none of us knew what that meant exactly, but they knew they wanted.
Yeah. And
so that was an important conversation to have way in advance. We talked about that, and we started putting together a team, because I didn't know anything about orchestral music. We started finding, you know, an engineer who recorded, and a studio where we do it, and a contractor who could hire the musicians, an orchestrator. We needed to work far in advance, and I also needed to study. I had to basically bring myself up to speed on orchestral music.
What's your history in general with orchestrating, conducting, or let's say conducting? Do you conduct for Hudsucker Proxy or Miller's, or, you know, some of the more kind of lush, whatever that word means, scores? Do you conduct yourself, and is that an advantage if you can conduct?
Well, the best way to explain it is to say that I began getting into music. You know, I started playing piano in high school, playing blues. College, started playing rock and roll. At the end of college, became interested in electronic music. I went to Harvard. There's an electronic music studio there.
Right.
Did some work at the Media Lab at MIT.
MIT, yeah.